I'm Nathan Judah. It's Sunday afternoon, which means, of course, time for another video. I'm here with Wolves reporter Mr. Liam Keane. Liam, this morning, the big news, Gary O'Neill is no longer manager of Wolverhampton Wanderers Football Club or head coach of Wolverhampton Wanderers Football Club. Devastating blow last night in the 94th minute. Remains to be seen whether that goal will have changed things or not. You know, would Gary O'Neill still be in a job if they'd drawn 1-1? Maybe not. We don't know. I'm sure that will come out in the wash maybe in the next few days. But what we do know is he is no longer at the football club, neither are any of the backroom staff. Wolves 19th in the table, look staring relegation in the face at this moment in time. And it's a mess. It's a mess from top to bottom, Liam. And before we go on to the developments this afternoon, just a word on Gary O'Neill, I guess his time at Wolves and whether this was the right decision now or should it have been done earlier. And of course, the statement backing him that came out only 48 hours before that.
Yeah, unfortunately for Gary, it's felt untenable for some time now, hasn't it? I mean, we had that 4-0 loss at Everton, and we reported at the time that Wolves were sounding out replacements, upping that search. It seemed likely he was going to go then before a U-turn, really, to give him the West Ham game initially and then to publicly back him. Gary's overall job at Wolves will be slightly disrespected in the sense that the first season went pretty well considering the state he found the club in, and then injuries meant they had a terrible end really to the season. And this year, unfortunately, will be what he's remembered for by supporters, a really damaging end to the campaign, or his part in the campaign rather, with 9 points from 16 games, with 15 set-piece goals conceded, with 40 goals now I think conceded in the Premier League. I mean, Wolves' stats defensively in particular have been atrocious. Gary's attempted all different solutions, different combinations. He's made big decisions in getting rid of the set-piece coach, changing captain, and nothing has stuck, nothing has worked. And it felt like this was going to be the end result eventually, regardless of the official public backing of Jeff Shee, of Gary O'Neill rather, from Jeff Shee. So regardless of that, it felt like we were going to come to this point, and that Ipswich game was the final nail in the coffin. It was a game that, performance-wise, Wolves were the better team, to be brutally honest. But two terrible errors again for the two goals, a couple of individual performances that were way below par, and this team is left sleepwalking into relegation without a change. The one change you can make during a season, you can't sack a board, you can't sack players. You have to make, or eventually make, the head coach decision. Wolves have made theirs, and they now need a desperate improvement very, very quickly.
Not a good look though, is it, when your chairman comes out just before the game and publicly backs him? The stories ran that he was definitely going to get the Ipswich game, and potentially longer than that, subject, and this was always subject, and you put it in your exclusive as well, easy for me to say, that was subject to Jeff Shee changing his mind. And it appears that Jeff Shee, we're not sure whether he was at the game yesterday, definitely wasn't in the director's box, but that was probably the final nail in that coffin. The end of that game, and not just maybe the end of that game, but the scenes we saw afterwards, the unsavoury scenes, for really a running trend here in terms of Jose Sarr going into the South Bank, in terms of Mario Lamina at the end of that Monday night football game, and then you've got Reinhard Noria and Mateus Cunha involved in really terrible scenes. And look, we could be looking at retrospective action potential to Mateus Cunha, which I don't really want to talk about at this moment in time, because that's just adding insult to injury and will be an absolute disaster for Wolves. But yeah, it seems like they hadn't got control on the pitch or off it, and it wasn't changing anytime soon. And maybe that's why that they had to make that call, because they need discipline. And this side haven't got discipline. I'm sick and tired about this team being emotional. You can be emotional, one thing, but stupid you can control, and they're being stupid at this moment in time. And it looked like they'd gone in that dressing room, and yeah, it did need someone to come in and change things. And obviously the hierarchy decided that wasn't Gary O'Neill.
And regardless of what you say or do as the head coach, if you've got players 2 games in a row, and obviously you mentioned the Jose Sarr one, which was only 4 games ago, whether it's with fans, teammates, or opposition players, having these really embarrassing outbursts, it's going to reflect badly.
Public outbursts. This isn't
exactly.
training ground stuff. This is in the middle where you've
in
got
front of the world's
30,000
cameras.
fans.
You know, exactly. It's going to reflect badly on the person who leads them. Gary's been very clear in saying these people get severely punished. Obviously, Lamina lost his captaincy. Big decisions were made, and they still couldn't quite control them. Now, the individuals themselves have to take a lot of responsibility for. Of course, they do. Moronic, really, in how some of them have behaved. Whoever comes in, of course, we're going to talk about next, has to get a grip of those individuals, of those personalities, and have everyone pushing in the same direction again. Now, one thing I will add before we move on to that is that, look, Gary does make mistakes. He's definitely not blameless. We've highlighted lots of them, and we'll continue to speak about them for as long as they're relevant. But the way in which Wolves are being run by Fosun at the moment, from a self-sustaining point of view, financially, is going to handicap any manager. Gary Neal was let down in that regard, suffered for it, alongside compounding that with his own errors. I'm sure there'll be some signings in January. There'll be some money available, the extent of which we are yet to see. But if money is thrown at it, and this manager keeps this team in this league, there has to be a slight change in the way that the club is run. If you continue to underspend in a league that is continuously spending more and more each year, it will catch up with you. If Wolves don't get relegated this season, they will in the very, very near future eventually, because it's currently not working. You can sell your best players for big money and reinvest and make it work. Other clubs have done it, but Wolves aren't reinvesting the money. That's the problem. No. And they're not reinvesting it in, senior talent that will come in and make a difference to the starting 11 straight away. Without that, any manager, whether it's Gary O'Neill or Pep Guardiola, any manager is going to struggle keeping this club in the league. And I think that's a really important point that we have to highlight.
So moving on, and you've got to expect that when Gary O'Neill was sacked this time, it was not going to be, they're going to wait and see, and they're going to get their search far and wide. They're going to have someone ready to come in, and reports have emerged that Vitor Pereira is the man who is in advanced talks, and you've got to say is the big favourite to be announced, and potentially announced at the start or the middle of this week coming up with a huge game against Leicester City. Look, if it is him, Liam, I saw a bookmaker's list at the start of this morning. I think there was 45 managers and he wasn't one of them. Definitely, you could give me 100 guesses and I don't think that would have come up. Interesting CV, had a lot of success, but it's definitely had a lot of clubs as well, especially recently. What do you know? What do you know from the last half an hour, 45 minutes when you've looked at it? But what do we know about Vitor Pereira, and what could he bring to Wolves potentially on the early signs with what he's done in his career?
Yeah, I think it's going to split a few. It's going to cause a bit of debate. He had some really good success early in his career. So he had a very brief footballing career, sort of lower leagues, retired at 28, started coaching a few lower league teams in Portugal. Eventually was the assistant to André Villas-Boas at Porto. And after a year there, when Villas-Boas went to Chelsea, he took over as head coach. And in his 2 seasons as head coach, he won back-to-back league titles at Porto. Don't get me wrong, it was a fantastic Porto team, by the way, at the time, of a very well-known player in João Moutinho was part of that squad. It was a fantastic team, don't get me wrong, but they were up against also a very good Benfica side at the time. There was a few other good teams. And he did a brilliant job at Porto in his 2 years there. As I say, back-to-back titles, really, really impressive. Look, from the outside in, because he's not worked in England, and obviously I can only do my research to a certain extent from outside. But it does seem to me like he hasn't really replicated that same success. And this was 2011 to 2013 we were talking about. He has gone to some big clubs. Like he's won the league in Greece with Olympiacos. He won the league in China with Shanghai. He's been to Turkey with Fenerbahce twice. He's been to Corinthians and Flamengo in Brazil. But he's been to Saudi Arabia twice. And he's currently there with Al Shabab as well. But he has jumped around a lot of different clubs. And I think it's important to highlight one of them, which was in 2016, he joined 1806 Munich, who were in the 2nd division of Germany at the time, took over them on the 18th of December 2016, which incredibly is only a few days away from now as we are recording.
3 days away.
Ended up taking them down into the third division of German football, finishing third from bottom at the time. Now, I'm sure there'll be lots of context that goes into that. For obvious reasons, I wasn't covering that German club at the time. So I think giving him the benefit of the doubt is important. But we also have to highlight exactly what his career has been. Very, very impressive early on. Had a tough time in the last few years, but has come very close to the Premier League in the past with Everton on a couple of occasions. And is desperate to work in the Premier League. As it stands, Wolves are in talks with him. There is a release clause that Wolves are willing to pay. The manager is keen on it. And look, things can change quickly, but as of 20 to 5 this evening on Sunday night, it looks likely that Wolves will get him in a dugout in time for the trip to Leicester.
And one person he does know very, very well is Mr. João Gomez, who was suspended for this game, but played with him in Brazil. So, let's expect a recall for João Gomez at Leicester City if he is in the dugout by then.
My word, let's hope to expect a recall for João Gomez, regardless of who's the manager, because we could spend the next half an hour talking about some performances from the Ipswich game. But yeah, look, he's a manager that has been sort of regarded as progressive and attacking on plenty of his teams. He's played a lot of back threes and back fives at different clubs. Has been doing that with Al Shabab. Did that with Fenerbahce. His Porto team did play 4-3-3 and was very attacking. In Brazil, I think he was more well known, from what I can understand, for being quite defensively rigid. So brings with him characteristics of hopefully a team that in Wolves, which we all know what the problems are, fix that leaky defence and keep the attack as free-flowing as it has been at times this season. It's easier said than done, but if you can do that, this Wolves team has got quality to stay in the league. And of course, January will be very important for the new manager, if it is to be Vitor Pereira.
It's going to be a very interesting few days. Gary Neal, no longer head coach of Wolverhampton Wanderers. Vitor Pereira, the big front runner for all the latest on that news, on that managerial appointment when it happens. Make sure you log on to expressandstar.com.